Endless Evolution is a community engaged in the exploration of human experience. We engage with one another to understand our unique paths. We talk, we laugh, we heal, and we invite others to share this journey with us. Won't you join us? Endless Evolution.
So many humans, and where's the humanity?
Well, good afternoon, Aaron. How are you
Good.
doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Naomi?
I'm making it every day,
Uh,
somehow through the day and remembering that all of this shall pass, whatever that
yes.
means.
Yeah. Well,
I feel
you're
like
doing a
some
great job.
I feel like some shit never really passes. It just
No, it doesn't.
gets pushed down.
But you know what? It's interesting. I stopped watching the news because I
Hmm.
was like being overwhelmed by it, and I feel like I need to reconnect because I don't know what's going on in the world.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so that's why I'm so happy that you suggested this book. Like it had touched my heart. It
Yeah.
has opened my eyes. And so this is like my, news source, if you will, by an authentic source.
Right. Right.
We're dealing with so much this misinformation and disinformation going on.
Yeah, so to remind everybody, oh, you can't see it with my blur on. There we go. We are talking today about One Day Everybody Will Have Always Been Against Us by Omar El Akkad. His actually his first book that is not purely fiction, because he's written some other books that were fiction, some dystopian like books. I got both of them and started them, have not finished them. But what I loved about this book was that it was a mixture of like storytelling and personal narrative, and then hard like facts, like
Yes.
his history, right? So I was a historian by degree, and I love a good historical book.
Mhm.
And I just loved how he mixed together the narrative with his own personal experience of being what Egyptian born and raised in Kuwait and then eventually
Yes.
moving to, did he move to Canada
Mo-
first?
He moved, I think he moved to Canada and then Oregon. Or
Right.
Oregon
Yeah.
or Washington. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was
Yeah.
Oregon. Yeah.
And became like this journalist slash writer and finally decided to give us this book. So yeah, it's One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This.
It it's amazing. That point that you just pointed out about him using narrative and using his own life and interweaving it into the story of Gaza and not just about Gaza and not just about the Arab world outside of the United States, but like what the United States has done in the name of freedom and equality and is totally antithetical to what it's saying it's doing.
Right.
But I almost read it like, and my favorite author of all time is Toni Morrison. I almost read it like a Toni Morrison novel where the timeline is sort of disjointed and on
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
I like that. For me, it kind of stretched me a little bit to remember, okay, what is he referring to now? I got to go back and reread this, and then I have
Right.
to, make at least try to one of these games I played is try to make the connection that he was making before he actually made it to see whether or not that it connected with him the same way it did for me.
Sure, because he's talking about, for our listeners, the current attack and genocide going on in Gaza, but also connects it back to the ongoing struggle in that region, the ongoing conflicts in that region, the ongoing oppression happening in that region. He talks about the other U.S. wars and the other U.S. forays into other parts of the world, as well as this part of the world. So I agree with you. He did a really good job of making the reader connect dots. And I think that's one of my favorite things to do. When I facilitate, I've always said this and I've never done it, but I've always said that I should develop a professional learning series on connecting dots because
Hmm.
we assume that
Hmm.
people have all of these points of information and see how they flow together and connect. And
Yes.
yet, the more and more I encounter individuals in different work settings, they don't connect the dots. And then in personal settings, they don't connect the dots. And I'm like,
Yes.
it seems so clear and obvious to
Absolutely.
me. The lines are like boom, boom. They're not even dotted. They are like clear, straight lines. And yet, so many people, they struggle to see correlation and connection between one thing and another. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, One of the other things along those lines that I love about this book, and it made me think, in a maybe in a broader sense about how we need this unifying, um, I can't think of another word, but theory,
Hmm.
and um, that looks at multiple theories that have already been, already theorized, but kind of puts them together. So I think about like um, Dr. King's message of nonviolence that he came up with by reading disparate theories,
Hmm.
by reading Nietzsche, and by reading, Thoreau, and by reading Gandhi and reading Karl Marx. At
Right.
that time,
Yes.
communism, like people were being persecuted for being communists, and
Correct.
he's taking all of these ideologies and kind of putting them together into his um his campaign for nonviolence. And
Sure.
so um El Akkad El Akkad's book for me does that to a degree.
Hmm.
Looking at the different ways that language is being used, the different ways that we're classifying who's human and who's not. Like it's unifying that in a sense. And I think this book can be used among many to sort of come up with that. Um, Not that we need, a framework or something to follow, but it's helpful for us as human beings as we compartmentalize certain things so
Yeah.
much. It's helpful when we can read across these texts and make those connections because, like you, some things are like so obvious, and I'm wondering like how come people don't see this? Like
Right.
particularly his I listen to language a lot, and my favorite chapter in this book is his chapter about language
Hmm.
because I quipped the other day that in between I read books in between reading books.
Right, right, right.
So the in between book right now that I'm reading is Language as Liberation by Toni
Well, there
Morrison.
you go. Your favorite author.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so as I'm reading Al Akkad's book, I come across the chapter about language, and I'm reading the book Language is Liberation by Toni Morrison. And
Right.
the connection that it made for me is the subtleties of speech that we use to bring across a message, and the underlying messages that are inherent in, a text or an oration of some type. But one thing stood out for me, and um, I'm just, I'm sorry, I just kind of forged ahead a little bit.
No, go for
Um,
it. We can
It's on
jump
page,
around.
it's on page 68,
Okay.
and it's like that first full paragraph there, and he says, "Language is never sufficient. There is not enough of it to make a true mirror of living. In this way, the soothing or afflictive effect of the stories we tell is not in whether we select the right words, but in our proximity to what the right words might be."
Hmm.
And so he's making this connection between not just the language, but the identity, the social standing that people have. And if we don't have proximity to the social status, the political status, the economic status, then our language is going to be, in a sense, disconnected from that. And the language that people use about and against us is going to be used to continue to perpetuate the oppression that, people are enacting upon others.
Yeah.
And so that just kind of brought it right home for me.
Yeah, I found that chapter to be incredibly powerful as well, and I think we commented offline as we were both reading the book, like how dense and powerful every paragraph in this book is.
Yes.
And while it's not a super long book, I think it's like I don't know, 100, about 200 pages long. Um, it's not necessarily a quick read. So here's what I think is so unique about this. Because it's not fiction, sometimes books are hard to get through. But because he tells it in a very personalized narrative fashion, and is able to relate and interweave, like you said, his own stories into modern day as well as past events, it reads like fiction,
Mhm.
but it's so not fiction. It's based in historical fact and in current events. And I think what that does is so incredibly powerful because a lot of us can read fictitious books. Last time we talked about James, and obviously there's lots of implications for real things that were happening in that time, right?
Mhm.
But it's still easy to distance yourself from the context of the book when it is when it is pure fiction, you know?
Yes.
So what I love about this book is that it reads so easily, it flows so easily because of the narrative style, but it's also chock full of information and contextualizes what's going on in Gaza to these bigger themes of power, of language, of connection, of
Yes.
who who gets the say into what's right or wrong and whose perspective will win and how convenient is it for us to now look back on the Vietnam War, for example. He uses that
Yes.
example, right? And point out all the atrocities committed by America and committed by those fighting against communism and those fighting against Soviet rule. And now saying, of course, one day we'll look back at this situation and also go, oh, yes, it was definitely a genocide and it was horrible that we were
Absolutely.
funding and proliferating this genocide on the backs of American tax dollars without consent and all of these things. But right now, that's not the popular sense, and that's not what the power players would have you think and say, you know. So I just think that mix of nonfiction with narrative makes it such an easy read, but it it makes you pause almost at every paragraph and go, "Whoa." Either let me reread that or let me think. So it's not a super fast read for those of you who didn't read it along with us or who didn't jump in and are still considering it. Know that you are getting yourself into meaty material, right? Not
Yes.
heavy, not like where it's too much for your brain to process, but it's meaty and it's going to give you something to digest.
It is dense. And you before you read it before I did, and before you're like, you might have to go back and read some paragraphs a couple
Yeah.
times, which I had to do.
Yeah.
But here's this, being a word nerd, if you will,
Hmm.
here's and I'm sorry, I'm making light of it because it's a very heavy topic that he's talking
Right.
about. But I love the fact that he breaks the conventions of grammar and of syntax and of language. Um, and I don't know if that's poetic license or if it is his syntax, because
Right.
I, and please forgive me if
Yeah.
I
No,
don't
he's
mean
not a
to.
native English speaker,
Right,
right? Yeah.
right. That's where I was going. That's where I was going. And so I know, like, if I believe his native language is Arabic, the syntax is different than it is in English. And so I was wondering along the way, like, is he adhering to the rules of Arabic, but then writing it in English? And so that's, it caused me to have to think deeper into the meaning when he,
Yeah.
breaks the conventional rules of grammar and
Right.
punctuation. And
Right.
there's one paragraph, it's like almost 2 pages long, and I'm like, this dude is right. He's like in a flow right here.
Yeah. Well, and is it also his way of using language as a tool to also speak to power, right?
Yes,
Because the traditional rules of language and grammar are set by those who established those rules of language and
absolutely.
grammar and who had the power to do so, right? So is there some intentionality? Because he's a trained, degreed journalist. Like, it's not that he doesn't know those conventions, right?
Right,
So the
right.
fact that he's intentionally not following them leaves you to wonder, is it just because he's going with his natural flow as a writer, his artistic license, or is there some intentionality given the topic of the book, right? Like the challenge to power.
That's what drew me in, to be honest with you. It drew me in because when I read formulaic writing, it's
Hmm.
disingenuous to me. You
Yeah.
know, just like when we talk, we don't talk in complete sentences and we don't talk, we don't organically punctuate everything. But that drew me into the content because I'm aware of what the genocide that's being enacted upon the
Hmm.
Palestinian people right now, and now the Lebanese people, and now the Iranian people, and
Hmm.
uh, the the people of Yemen, and all the people that live in that region who are indigenous to that region.
Hmm.
Um, but that made me want to know more about the things that I don't know. Like, what is it? It's so he's so passionate about it that, and forgive my language, he said, "Fuck a comma." I
Yeah.
don't need a period right here.
Hmm.
I'm gonna speak. I'm gonna write in the way that I want to write to
Hmm.
get my message across, to make it
Hmm.
as authentic as possible. And
Hmm.
it's up to you, the reader, to kind of decode that a little bit, or to do
Sure.
some further research about some of the things that I'm talking about. And I don't know, it drew
Well,
me in.
again, I think he does some of that intentionally because he talks about how language has been manipulated and kind of whitewashed and sanitized to Israel's benefit during this
Mhm.
entire process um, to downplay Israel's actions, to downplay the preventative or lack of preventative measures Israel has taken to de-escalate, right? Any tensions that would lead up to this, the language that has been used to downplay or simply, uh, you know, erase, avoid even telling readers and listeners about Israel's role as an entity, as a governmental entity in the land grabs and in the, pushing out support to Western countries through religious ideology when it really has nothing to do with religion at all, right? So
Absolutely.
I think he went to very complex language and long thoughts, and I call it the onion effect, and I'll tell you why. Before I lived in Spain, I was considered a very prolific writer, an excellent writer,
Mhm.
in the English language. And then I lived in Spain, and when I was writing in Spain, I was writing the way I had been taught to write in English, but in Spanish. I wasn't
Mhm.
translating, I was just applying my Spanish language to my English syntax and rules, right?
Mhm.
And all of my Spanish professors are like, "Why are you writing like a child?" I said, "Excuse me?" They're like, "You're writing these very clear, direct, simple sentences. Where's the onion?" They asked me. And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And they said, "There's not a single thought that's just like, Julie went to the store. Like, there's other things that happened along the way. There's
Mhm.
reasons that caused her to go to the store. I
Yes.
want to know all of the layers of the onion of Julie going to the store and not just the fact that she went to the store, right?"
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, so then I had to adapt my writing style to telling whole stories. And that's why in Spanish, much like in other languages, sentences can be a page long
Great.
because it's like the whole onion is
Yes.
being unpeeled layer by layer in that one sentence. And it's encouraged to have very complex sentences like that, very compound, complex sentences like that. Things that our professors here would be like, get this more succinct, chop this
Right.
down, get to the
Right.
point, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and so I love that onion effect because what it does simultaneously is it makes us think as readers and it makes us examine his whole point of how the simplistic, childlike language that Israel is afforded in all of its actions contrasts all of this concept of like, well, it's really complex. And he's like, it's not complex. There
No.
is one power that is starving and killing other people without reason, without cause for that, right? And he's not even explaining about the conflicts between the two groups. He's talking about there's no action that would justify this reaction. if you want
Absolutely.
to even frame it like that, right? So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I going back to, I know we're kind of digging into the language chapter, but it's a reason why I think it's the most important one,
yeah,
because that's what starts our our thinking around a particular topic, is the language, is the complexity, is the simplicity, right? When you're, like you said, when you're teaching a child something, you have to talk in very specific, clear, direct sentences,
hmm,
versus you expect an adult who has a modicum of, morality in them to not have to have things that direct. But maybe you do. Maybe you I mean, I think he buttons that up at the end. He said basically it boils down to this. Like, either you believe that Palestinian people should be killed, or you think they shouldn't be. Like,
right,
there's that is the line in the sand. And I want to say something say something else. And I know you know this, and I know you believe this, but maybe some of our readers or some of our listeners or watchers
right.
need to have this talking about language, need to have this explicitly said. And you touched upon it, but I just want to emphasize it, that this is not about um, people who believe in the Jewish faith,
Not at
that
all.
who this is about a colonialist state, Israel, being supported by another colonial state, the United States of America, who are
Hmm.
enacting a genocide upon an innocent people.
Yep,
That's what this is about, point
correct,
blank.
correct.
Now they're poisoning the water with
Right,
sewerage,
right.
the surface water.
And
Like,
I will say no different than the genocide that was enacted upon innocent Jewish people
yes,
during World War
for,
II,
for sure, for
right? Like
sure.
no different. So,
Yes,
and he even speaks about that whole like never again
yes,
for whom, and that's why he boils it down. That's why he draws that line in the sand. Do you
yes.
consider Palestinians to be humans? Do we consider everybody to be human and have dignity of life and never again should apply to all of them, or you don't, right?
Yes.
Like
Yep.
if and that makes people really say, well, how do I how do I make light of this concept that never again or that I don't believe in killing, and yet you're continually supporting these actions and able to explain it away and able to justify it time after time after time, the censorship of people who speak up and say free Palestine, the censorship of news media if they show anything that might be pro Palestinian in the news coverage of it, what's happening, right? Like I can't watch the news, Aaron. I choose not to, and I also can't because it is completely biased and
Yes.
censored in this
100%.
country. There is no reporting. There is zero reporting from the Palestinian perspective or from the oppressed perspective at all, or let alone from the humanitarian perspective.
They killed all the journalists. I mean,
Yeah,
come on,
there's
let's.
none, right? And so one of the questions, and just for people listening to us, we're kind of taking cues from the Amnesty International Book Club guide that was produced in 2025 to help accompany this book. That, one of the really standout ideas here is they ask like how did you even understand if this is your first book around it. I don't know where
Mhm.
you've been, like if you've never heard of the Palestinian genocide until now, that's unbelievable, but okay.
Mhm.
But they ask, and I wonder like how much did we all become informed and depend upon the actual Palestinians who were live streaming and reporting from the ground to actually get anything of their side of the story, the humanitarian side of the story, or of the actuality of what those bombings and what those conditions were like, right? And if
Yeah.
it weren't for them, you know, and we're only relying on mainstream media here, not even mainstream media, like all media here.
Right, right. Aside from Al Jazeera, that's probably what I trust
Correct.
right now.
Correct. We would also have a very skewed image of everything that's going on. And we also would be part of that group that he talks about when it's safe and when everybody who's been responsible for this is dead and there's nobody left to hold anybody accountable will be like, oh, yeah, I was against that all along.
Yes,
And it's always made me wonder, like, is the Germans who are descendant of those times, right? Who say, no, my parents, my grandparents never supported Hitler. They were against it all along. They just could not speak up because were they? Were they really against it all along? Or is it just easy and convenient to say that now because now there's no accountability attached to it, you know?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I've been making, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna go here. I've been making note of people who have not said a single word about not just bec- this genocide is bad enough. And one of the things I was going to mention earlier is that he doesn't play and I get this term from you. He doesn't play
Yeah.
the oppression Olympics, right?
Right. Right.
He talks about what a colonial state does to people, and he makes that very clear that colonial states have done this in the past, and they do it over and over
Over
and
and
over
over.
and
Yep.
over again. And so, but I forget where I was going with that point, but one of the things that stood out for me, I wrote a note about this, and he talks about how we've gotten to this point, and it's in the what chapter is this? It's in the now we're kind of hopping around here a little bit, folks, but this is one of those books because it's so rich that you know you're gonna think of things later on. But this is in chapter 7, and that chapter is called Lesser Evils. And there's this conversation. Oh, I know where I was going. There's this conversation among, mostly Democrats. And I will say this, I grew up in a Democrat household.
Yep.
We don't vote Republican in this household. We only vote strictly Democrat.
Sure.
Um, and I can't speak to much to what the Democratic Party was like during the early 80s because I was a kid and I can only read about it versus having lived through it. But I can speak now to what this party has done and allowed today and how complicit the Democrat Party
Mm-hmm.
is today
Mm-hmm.
in this genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always this sort of polarization, like the less you vote for the lesser of two evils.
Right.
How about we don't vote for evil? But
Right.
but like
How about that part?
particularly people who call themselves Christian or Muslim or Jewish who like how about we don't vote for evil at all? But here's what stood out for me. Um this is on page 124. And he's talking about he's talking about the Democrat Party, but liberalism
Hmm.
more generally. How empty does your message have to be for a deranged right wing to even have a chance of winning?
Hmm.
And I wrote, this should be the question of every so-called liberal.
Mm-hmm.
How empty does your message have to be that the people who call themselves liberal can't even support you because you are complicit? And so that's what this boils down to, whether or not you're complicit with genocide
Mm-hmm.
or not. And the
Right.
people who have not spoken up about it,
Mm-hmm.
have not said anything about it, choose to ignore it, choose to, whatever the case may be, I've made note of that
Yeah,
because I want to know where you stand on some other issues as well.
for
Like,
sure. For sure. Because as he points out, it's very typical of Western colonizing powers and Western people within those powers to finally support something once it's been neutralized or historicized, right? So,
yes,
or speak out against it, right? So,
right.
most people actually speak out against slavery as understanding that slavery was very damning and harming to the people who were enslaved and forced to bury and carry the burden of this country on their backs, literally.
Hmm.
Now, because it's
Right,
historicized in their mind and it's
right.
neutralized and it's not a current practice, right? So now people can look back on multiple events, the Vietnam War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the list goes on and on, right? the first Desert Storm or whatever, the
Yes.
attack on Iraq, and say, oh yeah, we fell for this whole weapons of mass destruction thing again, and yet here we are again. And
Let's
people are not supposedly supportive of this war, yet they're also not stopping it. And I'm not talking about just the people in the streets. I'm talking about our elected officials who are complicit to all of it, right?
absolutely.
So there's definitely like, this whole we are watching, but I think those of us who are watching um, are few and far between, Aaron, who are watching and not willing to just turn a blind eye when the next election comes. We see it
Absolutely.
going on right now in the state of Michigan. We have three candidates for senator on the Democratic side. And the biggest teardown of one of the candidates is that he's pro-Palestinian. That's it. They're trying to tear down his character and everything he's done, which has been incredibly supportive of every effort he's ever led, has been pro person, pro worker, pro community. He doesn't take corporate money. He doesn't take, um, uh, money from I'm missing the words, but from
APAC.
lobbyists like
Yeah.
APAC, but all the
Hmm.
lobbyists, he just doesn't take money from them,
Hmm.
and he's true to his constituents. And because he's Arab and he's pro-Palestinian, now somehow he's evil. And I'm like, and people are complicit to it, and people are not turning their eye because right now the bigger risk lands for those who are willing to speak up and who are willing to bear witness to the truth. Um,
Yes.
when it's inconvenient. I think
Yes.
of the Javier Bardems or the Mark Ruffalo's within the
Yes.
Hollywood context who have said, I don't care if I don't get contracts. I have to do what's right, and I have
Absolutely.
to continue to speak truth, and I have to continue to speak up against all of these things. Um, and so I think my question to everybody listening is, what will it take for you to not be complicit anymore, right? Is it that your family's getting killed? Is it that your ancestral lands are somehow being invaded? Um,
Mhm.
is it that it doesn't matter if it happens abroad, as long as you're safe here, you're okay? Like, what does it take? Because people here are being attacked. Is that mattering to you? Or is it that
Absolutely.
I get to just keep the blinders on each side? And as long as my stuff is good, I'm just going to keep rolling around and understand that there's just evil in the world and shrug my shoulders and go on. So that's my question to all of us is like,
Yes.
what is it going to take? Because we're undermining all of our rights. And I'm at a loss, Aaron, constantly, and this book just reinforced it for me, but I'm at a loss all the time of people who don't connect the dots
Hmm.
and people who feel like that over there doesn't impact me here because they don't connect the dots.
Yes.
I'll go on with one more thing and then I'll give you the
Please
floor
go.
because I've been
Please,
talking a
please.
lot. But
No,
my
no, go.
my sister and I were talking today and we're talking about tax returns and money and job security and she made a comment, rightfully so. She's like, it's not just about, like, she goes, I wish people would open their eyes because it's not just about all the innocent people who are being bombed there. This is impacting your life here. Like,
Yes.
you won't have a job tomorrow because the
Yes.
world's shutting down because of this war. You won't be able to afford gas in your car to get to your job, even if you have it. You won't, like, all of these things. She goes, and people aren't making those connections because it's over there and they're still not seeing it. They're not connecting the dots. And so I just question everybody, what does it take for you to connect the dots?
That's what makes Derek Bell's premise of
Mm-hmm.
interest convergence
Virgins, yeah.
so important because it doesn't just apply across, racial lines or, racial backgrounds. It
Right.
applies across socioeconomics, like it could be poor people, versus rich people. It could be, two countries that maybe even be of the same ethnic background, but different countries, just the border that's, separates them. So that question is a legitimate one. Like, what is it going to take? Because your gas price is going up. It should have. I mean, people are pissed now because their gas is going up, right? They're pissed now because AI is taking some jobs. They're pissed now because, you know, uh, for whatever reason, they can't find adequate and decent housing. But one of the things that this book has convicted me to do, in a ways, I feel guilty in a sense, when I enjoy the luxuries of living in the United States as a middle class person,
Hmm.
right? Um, that if I got to go buy a new pair of shoes or something like that, like I'm feeling this level of guilt because I know what's what's happening around the world to people, right? So if it's not if it's not the Palestinians, is it what's going on in Sudan and the Congo? If it's
Right.
not that, is it what's going on in Yemen? If it's not that, Iran. If it's not that,
Cuba being frozen out and starved
what
to death. Right. Yeah.
because the colonial state will do it to anyone. And that's what people have to realize. It will do it to its own people. So this idea that, you're engaging in this for some altruistic, notion to save Arab women from the oppressive, Sharia law, whatever the case may be, like
Hmm.
that, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. This is about human beings standing up for the rights of other human beings. Bottom line.
Yeah.
And and so that's he brings that home for me.
He has a really impactful paragraph on page 160. I finally found it because it really spoke to, like, we have to break out of this is just the way the dice have rolled in our favor or against our favor. This is just the way life happens. And he says, daily we are told that there is nothing better than this, right?
Mhm.
We're told that the most frightening thing is not this building chaos, but rather the possibility that any other course might end in secret police and breadliness. I'm sorry, and breadlines. Daily, the right-wing sphere and an alarming number of liberals fret about generation of young people deluded into Marxism or some other ideological boogeyman. When students at the most prestigious universities in North America build encampments in solidarity with Palestine, it's difficult to believe the institutional response isn't colored by a sense of betrayal. In reality, what is happening is the opposite of an embrace. It's showing a side of the present system, a system that makes it more and more clear there is no future, no community for this or any other generation to come. Only endless taking. And if these young people must pay for it by forfeiting hope or possibility or clean air on a livable planet, so be it. A system more petulant and intransigent than any other protester who ever lived. A system that can only sing, there is nothing better than this. Like, that's what we're living in. And if people
Mhm.
don't wake up and look at those realities and say, wait a minute, what are we doing here? Like, what are we doing here?
Mhm.
We're literally polluting the air beyond belief, not just with factories, but with bombs. Every bomb that goes off, think about all that pollution. These people can't even breathe, let alone starving them, literally starving them. We're polluting their lungs. We're bringing around about our own destruction, and we seem to be okay with that because we believe there can't be anything different. And so what this book inspires me to do is shake people and say, but there can be something different. It's really
Yes.
up to you about whether you're choosing that or not. And it's
Yes.
that simple, like he says at the end. It really is that simple. There's a
Yes.
choice
Yes.
around, do you like human beings
Yes.
or do you not like human beings, right?
Absolutely.
Do you
Absolutely.
claim to support humanity or do you not? Because this is not a for some and not for others situation, even though that's how we continue to behave.
It, in all the complexity of language and of thought and connecting the dots, I think it's critical that he breaks it down to that essential point that you just mentioned, that that's what the question is. Um, he also there's a point in the book, I passed by it when you took us to that quote. Um, and he's almost giving like this permission, if you will, for people who are overburdened or overwhelmed by what they're seeing and what they're
Right,
feeling.
right,
And this sense or this idea that if a lot of people are choosing to walk away. A lot of people are choosing being silent and walking away, I think, are two different things. I think
Hmm.
walking away can be a form of protest. Being silent, I think, is a function of being afraid
Yeah.
or
Or
being
complicit, right?
complicit
Yeah.
or apathetic, right? But walking away, just like if you walk away from a fight, you're exercising more restraint
Yes.
by walking away.
Correct.
Um, and so it reminds me, so I wrote a note here. Um, when he talks about people refusing to align with a, a, a country or an ideology like the United States, who refuse to buy, just like you think about the the boycotts of Target or
Right.
Starbucks or some
Right.
other
Right.
organizations, like that's their form of protest, and they do that loudly. You know what I'm saying? Like it's the belief that I will not shop at Target. Maybe I'm still shopping at Amazon, right? But I'm drawing my line in the sand at Target, and it reminds me of Trisha Hershey's uh her practice around rest is resistance,
Hmm.
which and we were talking earlier about putting together these sort of disparate ideologies and coming up with a framework around something. She part of her framework that she came up with, um, part of that she drew from,
Hmm.
came from the the societies of enslaved people, the maroon societies of enslaved people who just chose not to participate. They chose not to stay on the plantations, and they chose not to like fully run away because they knew that they would be captured
Right.
somehow.
Right.
They just chose not to participate whatsoever. And they built these societies in the swamps, in the bad, what people call the Badland,
Right.
Great Dismal Swamp in North Carolina. Like they built these thriving communities apart from capitalism, apart from, so-called democracy. They just
Hmm.
said, I am not participating whatsoever. Y'all can have this. I'm
Right.
done with,
Right.
and they said that early on in the Republic, right? Like, I'm done. If this is Republic, I'm done with it.
Right.
And so I I think that's a form of protest. If people are doing that, then I could support that.
Hmm.
I can't support the silence around the issue because silence is
No.
complicity.
Right.
And so
And I can't support Aaron the stepping away just for comfort. Right.
absolutely.
So if you're stepping away to build something else, to turn into community, to support your neighbors around you, to figure out how to really like, let's do our own thing here that makes sense and that makes all of us thrive.
Yes.
Amen. Like, let's
Yes.
do it, right? And I think that the more people that do that, the more humanity gets rebuilt. Because
Hmm.
outside of rebuilding the economic structures and the political structures of any, society, if you don't have the humanity structure
Yes.
solid from the ground up, all the rest will fall apart, right? Like in schools,
Absolutely.
we know that culture will eat structure every day of the week, right?
Yes.
So we got to get our culture right. We got to, and that means going into people's hearts and minds and going into morality. And you can't just wait until everything's done and gone and behind us to be like, oh yeah, that was horrible. And
Yes.
I was never in favor of what they were doing, really, because you could have fooled me, right?
Yeah.
And I think we need to challenge ourselves moving forward of modeling as much as we can. And I hate to put that on us because I think you and I carry a lot individually
Hmm.
in our lives. But I do believe that for those of us who see it and get it, and it's not just us, right? There's other people like us. It's incumbent that we model what it looks like to start to build community within this fractured society and to start to find ways of not beating ourselves into the ground out of guilt and out of sadness and out of sorrow because that happens too, right?
Right.
Because we get so overwhelmed by just the thought as empaths of what's going on in the world. We can go down that dark rabbit hole of grief really quickly and of heartbreak. I go down it frequently and I have to remind myself, but hold on for a second. If we think of ourselves as specks in the universe, right? A moment of time that we are in. what can we do to make the most of that moment of time? And it's not to just grieve, right? It's not to
Right.
just be sad. It's like, so how do we lean into each other and model support and love and community wherever we can, however we can, for as many people as possible? Because I do believe in this very bifurcated society in which we live.
Mhm.
Most people will either just go silent or will turn away out of comfort and protection. And very few people will be standing there in the middle left to hold the pieces together. I feel that I'm in that middle. I feel that
Mhm.
you're in that middle.
Mhm.
And so I welcome everybody else who's reading and feeling that same way to come join the middle and figure out how do we really uplift humanity and
Yes.
people's hearts and minds to love, right? That revolutionary love that Valerie Kerr speaks about so eloquently.
That's why we started this whole channel, right?
Right?
Because it came out of that notion of building community. We started with building community with one another
Hmm.
first, um, and then offering our musings, our thoughts, our vulnerabilities to, our listeners. I don't even know how many we have, but to our listeners, can it help somebody? Can the questions we pose help somebody? Can the things that we're grappling with as individuals or as a group of people,
Yeah,
can those things help somebody? Can our understanding of texts like this and the other ones that we've read,
right.
James being the first one, can that help someone? You said some people reached out to you and said they really needed this right now, and I was like,
Yeah.
really? Wow.
Yeah,
Like
I know it's great, right?
we're vibing off of just like the
Each other.
right each other, and it just being a great read. And so, like, what are the way going to your point, what are the ways you can build community, that you can humanize just one other person, right?
Yeah,
Just make somebody else there's this idea of that Freire talks about, of rehumanization.
right.
Like, how do you help to rehumanize somebody that has been dehumanized or
Yeah.
demoralized, or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be? Like, it could be their identity, it could be their racial identity, sexual identity. How have you as an individual, because those are things we can control.
We
We can
absolutely can. The interactions we have with one another, um, making sure that you're creating spaces that are bringing people or that are allowing people to show up with their full humanity and their full selves and not being discriminatory in your interactions and in your behaviors with other people. Like those are all things that I think, wow, can I do more of that intentionally? Can I model that? So I had this opportunity. I was asked to possibly join this effort to help mobilize more women and help, maybe contribute to either voter registration or mutual aid in some way. And I was speaking with the person and asked them to consider why do they have the need to create another organization rather than already like seeking out what's out there and pouring into those. And the honest response was, I don't know what's out there. Right.
Mm,
So then I had to sit back and say, is this an opportunity for me to expand vision and expand
mm,
knowledge and expand connections for people and bring these groups together? And now they're helping each other and helping each other with each other's humanity. Right. So the people wanting to offer help are growing in their knowledge and growing in their humanity and knowing that their views of things are not central to everything, right?
right,
And the
right.
people who are in need or who, would be receiving their help would also be growing, not only from the resources they're receiving, but from that interaction with people who are not in their immediate circles. And we need
Absolutely.
more of that. We
Yes,
need
absolutely.
more opportunity to function in circles that are diverse. And I know it's our instinct as human beings to go to what is known and go to what is familiar, particularly in times of threat and in times of harm or in times of imminent danger. But it is in these times more than ever that we've got to figure out how to build spaces where more of us can come together who are not alike to remind each other of our humanity, right?
Yes.
So, for as much as what the government of Israel and their Zionist approach is doing and breaking my heart on a daily basis, and now impacting even more people that I know, as Lebanon's being attacked. Um, that does not stop me from engaging with Jewish people who were raised here to support Israel no matter what. I
Hmm.
have to engage with them to engage and tap into their humanity. I
Hmm.
need to understand that just like they need to understand mine. And if nothing else, that exchange might shift perspective and might shift action. I definitely know it has more chance of doing and shifting than if we both stay silent in our respective circles, right?
Yes,
So like
absolutely.
that's a way that I've really thought of like how can I take those steps to ensure that I'm not just isolating and protecting myself by surrounding myself with like-minded and like people, right?
Yeah, yeah. Same. And I mirror that, and I would challenge our readers to seek out difference.
Yeah,
It could be a religious difference. It could be a gender or sexuality difference. It could be a difference in, you know, socioeconomic, background, whatever the case may be. Seek out somebody that's different and challenge your own thinking, right? One of the things that really frustrates me, and I can speak to this because I encounter it.
mm,
I'm a Christian. Um, but what frustrates me about some who profess to be Christians is the unifying principle in Christianity is love, but don't exhibit or don't embody or don't extend love
yeah,
to other people.
yeah,
And you know, it, I'm hard to love sometimes,
yeah.
and I'm appreciative when people do. And so, like, I going to your point, how do we how do we work through that cognitive dissonance
Mm,
that maybe our faith tells us versus what we see
right,
versus what we know that Palestinian people are human beings. We know that Jewish people are human beings. We know that Iranian people, Libyan people, we know that they're all human beings. But what causes that thing in our brain to use our faith to support exterminating a whole group of people?
right.
I don't know any faith that has called for a religious faith, a religious text that has called
Mm.
for the extermination of a group of people
Correct.
completely wiped off the earth.
Correct. And anyone who says that there such scripture exists is distorting scripture for their
Absolutely.
own personal gain or their own personal agenda. I really like that invitation, Aaron. Welcome difference into your life, whatever it may be, because it's only through difference that we stretch ourselves and grow. It's
Absolutely.
honestly, we do not stretch ourselves and grow surrounding ourselves with same minded people. It's
Absolutely.
comforting and we need it from time to time. Don't get me
Yes.
wrong, right? But we're never going to grow. And some people might say, well, I don't want to grow. And I'm going to say, then you're going to be part of those that will get eliminated eventually because
Yes.
it's only those of us who will continue to invest in humanity that have any chance of actually not just surviving, but thriving and
Absolutely.
seeing the type of space where we can all feel happy from the inside out and not just from the external resources that we have or have not. So
Absolutely.
I really just want to remind everybody when we're talking about these books, it's just skimming the topics and giving you a taste of what's in them and what can come from them. We really encourage you, if you did not read with us when we announced the book, to go ahead and read the book. So please, again, take a look at it. One Day Everybody Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El Akkad, and highly, highly, highly recommend.
Yes.
Aaron, you want to share what our next read's going to be?
Yes. So we are reading next Sky Full of Elephants by, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this right, Sibo Campbell.
I think so.
And I heard it's an excellent read. I it was recommended by someone I know, and so yeah, if you're watching us right now, if you want to read along with us and join our discussion on our next date, or just, listen to our discussion and maybe see how it connects with or doesn't connect with your thinking around the book, and please read along with us. And we'll be back soon with another video and conversation and just
Absolutely.
vibing around that.
And if you have any questions or want to leave comments or just want to say, hey, please know that you can go to speakpipe.com/endless evolution and leave us a message, leave us a question. We'd be happy to address it. Again, we thank you all for listening. Aaron, I can't wait for our next get together, and we
Same.
will, hopefully be able to enjoy some nice food together.
Yes, absolutely. I love we break bread and we talk about our joys, our frustrations, all
That's
that. I
right.
love it. I
That's
love it.
right. All right. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
All
Talk to you
right.
soon. All
Bye.
right. Bye-bye.
This episode of Endless Evolution is brought to you by the No Harm Organization, uplifting wholeness and humanity. Our featured music is Humanity by Lava La Rue.